Hyvä päivä, Pernat. WarmPotato has invited me to do a video on his channel. It's kind of video swap, so one of his will be appearing on my channel. So I've decided to pick a fight, because in one of his earlier videos he picked on Finland. So I've got my Viking braids in, my Viking bead in, I've got my axe of Ukko at the ready, and I'm ready to throw down with a potato. Well, there's just one thing missing. That's better.
One of the rebuttals I got to my first 5 videos was, Finland has some of the strongest unions on the planet, and their education system is one of the best in the world. It's meant to imply that this comment right here is meant to imply that if we strengthen our unions, our education system will become better.
Correlation is not causation, of course. But I think Finland, like many of the other Scandinavian nations, is very socialist. That's socialist, not communist, as regular viewers of my channel have had beaten into them with sticks. And that tends to go along with strong unions. The left-wing movement in most nations has sprung out of the union movement. And a strong teaching union tends to mean a strong educational system and tends to mean more educated people and people who are motivated to invest in society as a whole. And I think that's probably the implication that they were trying to give.
Right, but that comparison only really works if America and Finland are exactly the same. I mean, same neighbors, same borders, same domestic issues, same laws, same basically everything. When all things are equal, then we can point to unions as the one difference. But otherwise, there are just too many factors to compare these two directly. And so I call this rebuttal, but Finland.
I don't think this is an argument that really helps you that much, because the ways in which Finland is different more seem to suggest that America should more easily be able to do what Finland does in relation to education. It's a much smaller country, it has far less money, it's got huge areas of wilderness, much like the US does. There's all sorts of issues that it has. It's sandwiched between two other nations. It's close to Russia, which is hostile to Finland, Finland having kicked its ass during the Winter War, despite being this tiny little speck of a country. And yet they have decided to invest in their society and in their education, despite all these drawbacks, despite similar problems to the ones that the US has. And the US could do what Finland does far more easily. What's different appears to be the will of the people, and you would think that Finland, having fought the Soviet Union, would be much more paranoid, and having had a civil war over it, would be far more paranoid of left-wing ideas, and yet they've embraced them in terms of education and other areas of life because they work.
Russia doesn't dare try anything at all because they know the United States of America is...
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there, because I know the kind of thing that you're going to say. And it is true that a lot of European nations have become complacent because Big Brother US is hanging around over their shoulder, beating its fist into its palm over anyone that might start anything with them. But I don't think this is particularly true of Finland. Finland has a history of punching above its weight. It pays a relatively large amount of its GDP towards defence. Only 0.5% lower than the UK, which is considered a proper full partner to the US. The US spends a massively disproportionate amount of money on its defence, which is what makes everyone else look bad. But Finland kicks ass. This is Samohaiha. Now, he is a famous sniper in Finland. During the Winter War with the USSR in 39 to 40, he is credited with having killed over 500 Soviet soldiers, all by himself, using a sniper rifle with iron sights and a submachine gun. And then he survived being shot in the face. To this day, the Finnish continue to have a quite tough martial tradition. They have a cultural concept called Sisu, which is it's hard to put into English, but it's a kind of really tough self-reliance, going on no matter what, a fortitude, stamina, that sort of thing. And little wonder, considering what a harsh environment they come from. But they're not just ruggedly independent in the kind of cowboy mentality that America has. They also view it communally as a responsibility to each other. And again, little wonder given the harsh climate. What has won the Soviet Union more wars than anything else, or what has won Russia, I should say, more wars than anything else, is the winter. Finns don't give a single solitary fuck about the winter. It's a place of cold climate, hot saunas, and hotter women. This argument might be valid for a lot of places, but I don't think it's valid for Finland.
For the average Finnish person, losing about 20% to income tax is pretty normal. And now that you mention it, they also take another 2.12% for Social Security and another 20% for unemployment and other people's benefits. Heck, the personal income tax rate in Finland is almost 53% on average. On top of that, starting a business is complete hell because of all the taxes there, and, well, you get my point.
There's always something interesting missing from this kind of analysis of taxation, and that is what you get for your money. Now, I don't have access to all the Finnish statistics. I don't understand Finnish that well enough to navigate all the government pages and everything. But I do know when it comes to the UK and the US. The US spends about 17% of its GDP on healthcare. The UK spends about 10% of its GDP on healthcare, and we have a socialised healthcare system in much the same way that Finland does, though ours is better than Finland's. And we have 0 uninsured people, and America has something like 28 million uninsured people, yet our life expectancy is higher by a significant amount, and America's is lower by a significant amount. America is 37th on the World Health Organization rating for healthcare systems, and Britain is, I can't remember, somewhere about 10 or 10, 11 or 12, something like that, out of the world. So you have to consider what you're getting for your tax money. I mean, here in the UK and in Finland, which also scores better than the US on the WHO ranking, people are spending money, but they're spending less money than people are spending privately in the US for a better result for everybody. So the question is, why are you willing to pay more for a worse result from private institutions than to pay less into a collective fund with no profit motive, whose motive is healthcare, to get a better result? There just seems to be this kind of baseline hostility to the idea of governance or social spending or collectivization in any degree in the US that's not present in other nations, even when it works way better than the alternative.
Finland has free preschool and free daycare. Also, when you have a baby, you're gonna get a box of baby supplies, baby clothes. Hip hip hooray from the government of Finland. Cool, I guess, except the government paid for those baby clothes out of your own wallet. Like, literally, you're forced to give the government money, and then the government is going to buy baby clothes and then send it to you. It's...
This is another thing that people tend to miss when they're criticising socialised systems like this, and that's the economy of scale. When lots of things are being bought, you can lower the price. It's no different to, say, you and a bunch of mates clubbing together to meet the criteria to get a special offer on pizzas, because it's cheaper for the company to make pizzas in bulk and larger, it's cheaper for them to deliver more at the same time, and so on. And the economy carries on through the whole system, plus a government can forego the people they're buying things from having to pay tax on those earnings and so on. So when you're buying lots of something, it tends to be cheaper, and this applies to healthcare, it applies to the baby boxes we're talking about here, it applies to education. And plus there's other knock-on effects as well. When you invest in preschool and early education, that tends to have a knock-on effect on the rest of education. You know, a good start sets you up for the way forward, and people who are more educated are less criminal, contribute more to society, earn more, are more likely to create innovations and so on. So the overall benefit to society far outweighs the cost at the start. And when it comes to things like the baby clothes, you know, this ensures that children can get a good start. They can be fed, there's formula, you know, they can be kept warm, it reduces deaths, reduces problems, and even the most impoverished people can give their babies at least a basic start, which again has this knock-on effect throughout society that's good for everyone. The preschools and so on allows women to go back to work sooner, which contributes to the economy. Yeah, all of these things have an ongoing economic and social benefit beyond this narrow point of cost. And what would you pay privately to get all these things? How much would childcare cost if you did it privately? When it comes to education, the Finnish are getting an education of comparable quality to expensive private education, but for free. Yeah, and healthcare, what would that cost you? Tot it all up, and you'll see that there is a very definite economy of scale, even without getting into the societal benefits and how that pays off.
Finland spends 1.3% of their GDP on the military. The USA spends double that at 3.5%. Finland has 30,000 active military personnel. The USA has 1.5 million active military personnel. Finland is not a part of NATO, and it gives 11 million to the UN. America pays for 22% of NATO and gives 8 billion to the UN. To point out the differences directly, the USA is the military granddaddy of the world, patrolling the seas, giving lots of money to NATO and the UN, and spearheading everything. Finland is reaping the benefits.
Finland actually spends between 1.4 and 1.7, depending how you calculate it, of their GDP on the military, and this is comparable or slightly above most other nations in the world. It's roughly comparable to the other Scandinavian and European nations. America is a huge outlier on this, and their society would be a lot better if they didn't spend so much on the military. They don't even need to. It just seems to be some kind of dick-waving contest. It's also not exactly true how many troops Finland has available here. I mean, you've got to consider the difference in size of the countries here. It's not really fair to consider it in that way. You need to consider it in terms of scale to population, as you have with GDP on the military. But Finland has universal male conscription into the military and voluntary female conscription into the military. Sexism aside, what that means is everyone, male, has to spend some time on either civilian or military training, and every able-bodied man is subject to conscription. So on the outbreak of war, 1.75 million Finnish men between the ages of 16 and 64 roughly immediately called up into military service, and practically every Finnish house has a rifle. Everyone has been trained, and they're renowned snipers and fighters. You know, this is part of the reason that they kicked the Soviet Union's ass, that and the terrain and everything else. Whether that would scale to fully modern warfare, we have no idea. But to suggest that they're weak or not pulling their weight somehow simply isn't accurate at all. They just go about it a different way, and it seems to be a way that has been historically effective and cheaper. Worth thinking about.
In the USA, we have drug trafficking due to cartels from Latin America sending tons of illegal narcotics across the border, breaking up families, bankrupting people due to massive drug addiction and such. In the USA, we also have massive human trafficking, also called sex trafficking.
Much as it pains me to admit it, these problems are not unique to America. They're not unique to the Western Hemisphere. There are gangs everywhere. Just Fortunately, in a lot of places they have much less access to guns than they do in the US. There are drug problems everywhere. Our drugs tend to get smuggled up from Africa or from the Middle East. We have drug problems just as much as the US does. We just have different drug problems. Sex trafficking everywhere tends to get overstated. Largely because people who are anti-sex work tend to blow it up out of all proportion so that they can attack sex work in general and adult work in general and pornography and all of this. And this is a good way to do it because it tugs at people's heartstrings and they have no compunction about lying about it because they see the ends as justifying the means. But it does happen, and it happens a lot in Europe. A lot of Eastern European women are trafficked into Europe. So yeah, that's a problem that we do have, even if it's massively overstated, just as it is in the US. Immigration, it seems odd that you would put this here, because if you listen to American right-wing demagogues going on and on, you'd think that Europe was completely overrun with violent Muslim immigrants. But we do have immigration issues, even if again they're blown up out of all proportion. But it is creating tension, and Finland is no different there. They've just been having votes and things about how many immigrants to take in from the Middle East. They already have quite a lot in. There have been some social issues, and there has been a very slight rise in the right wing in Finland in response to this. So, yeah, that's an issue that happens. Finland is, as you've pointed out, right next to Russia, and they're well aware of it, and they have a big national debt, just as you've pointed out yourself earlier. These aren't unique issues to America, and they're not anything that should stop anyone from investing in their society. Indeed, if you want to address gangs, drug use, criminality in general, and many of these other issues, one of the best ways to do it is social investment. It's much more effective than policing, and it has a huge knock-on positive effect for society. Again, America would do a lot better and achieve its ends in reducing crime and these problems a lot more cheaply if it embraced more socialist policies. Yeah, this is as close to fact as you get in social science, which I'm not a fan of, but this is as close as you can get. Social investment works much better than the alternatives.
Final notes. In Finland, you spend 4 hours a day in the classroom. People say, is that good? Is that bad? Who knows? In Finland, you aren't paid based on how well kids do, good or bad. You're paid no matter what. Okay, is that good or bad? Who knows? In Finland, teachers work on their own and teach what they want. Good or bad? Who knows? In Finland, they teach kids what they want to learn, which I think is great if it's true. And they take their time with an education really in depth, which I also think is pretty great. In Finland, instead of forcing everyone to college, you have the option to go to trade school. They encourage kids to actually learn a craft, which I think is really great. In Finland, you don't start school until you're 7 years old, and there's tons of recess. Pretty great. Also in Finland, things like metalworking and other crafts are mandatory, which I think pretty awesome, right? Give kids everything.
All right, final thoughts, and you do wrap up in a good way here, showing that it's more than just unionization, that it's more than just socialism, that it's more than just throwing money at the problem that's different about Finnish education. But it's all part of the same thing. The strong unions, the strength of the teachers' voice in all this has helped shape the Finnish education system, and it's hard to argue with results. It is one of the best education systems in the world. So all those things where you're saying, we don't know, well, we do. It produces better results. And in my country, as in yours, the education system has been a bit of a political football, with different approaches from left and right being fought back and forth, and the education system changing according to who's in government. And that hasn't been good for anybody. In America, there is this general hostility to the idea of public anything, which starves your school system of funds, which has knock-on effect, which means you have less qualified teachers and all the other things. But there's things from the Finnish approach that we could adopt in other countries without having to wholesale adopt their culture. And I think underestimate exactly how empty parts of Finland are, how remote some parts of Finland are. It might be a small country, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have similar issues to the US in that sense. Things can be scaled up to a degree, and certainly the approach that the Finnish take could be adopted in the US and vastly improve your education system without you having to adopt or even go sniffing near that nasty socialism word. This video is very unlikely to bring anyone over to my channel because it's gone on about all this kind of stuff in a fair amount of depth, but that's part of what I do. I also take the piss out of things, comment. I've come across very socialist here, and I am a socialist, but I'm the kind of sane socialist of the old school, not one of these new social justice warrior types who I think have everything pretty much entirely wrong. So if you want a refreshing, different but left-wing view on things, then please do drop by my channel. I also talk about games, writing, I'm an author and a game designer, all kinds of interesting shizzle like that. So I do hope you'll stop by. Knock him in.
Take a ride, take a shot now. There's nobody